Genesis chapter 6 verses 1 to 4 in the New American Standard Bible. Now, it came about when mankind began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God, who found out their angels, saw the daughters of men, who were women, were beautiful. They took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not remain with man forever, because he is also flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God, angels, came in to the daughters of men, women, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. After spending over 20 episodes on the identity of the sons of God in verses 1 and 2, now in the last 2 episodes, we have been looking at verse 3, studying it, taking vital lessons from it, and that will nicely lead us into verse 4. We said that Genesis chapter 6 verse 3 is a judgment statement. Something has been going wrong, but when we got to Genesis chapter 6 verses 1 and 2, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And God stepped in, just like he stepped in the book of Genesis chapter 3. God stepped in again, and God judged the situation. We have divided this verse 3 into 3 parts. Just for the sake of our teaching, we divided them into 3 parts. The Lord said, part 1, my spirit will not remain in man. And we have looked at that. What does that mean? We have looked at that. He said, because he is flesh. We have looked at that, and we spent some time looking at that in our last lecture. And we said here, this is the origin of the concept of the flesh that become ubiquitous in the New Testament, particularly in the epistles of Paul. Here is what we have not dealt with yet. Nevertheless, is this shall be 120 years. Now, that is the one that we need to look at. For us to rightly interpret this phrase, there are 2 thoughts we must have. Okay, number 1, we must remind ourselves, how did we get here? How did we go from Genesis chapter 1 to 3, and from Genesis chapter 3 to 6, and then in Genesis chapter 6, how did we go from verse 1 to verse 3? In other words, we have to look at the context, we have to look at the co-text, we have to look at the text, the context, and the co-text. And then number 2, like we said, we need to remember that this statement here is a judgment statement. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not remain with man forever, because he is also flesh. Nevertheless, okay, you see, number 3 is connected to number 1 and 2. My spirit will not remain with man forever, because he is flesh. Nevertheless, okay, nevertheless, and this is the judgment. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. Now, there are 2 major traditional ways that this phrase has been interpreted. There are 2 traditional ways. Okay, just like when we were looking at the sons of God, there were 3 traditional ways. This verse, there are 2 major. Now, there are other ways, 1 or 2 other ways that people have interpreted it, but these 2 major ways are the ones that we are going to look at. So there are 2 major traditional ways that this phrase has been interpreted. And what we'll do is that we'll look at them one after the other. Now, the first view today, the first view is that the 120 years is the lifespan that God is imposing on human after the flood. Is this view supported by scripture? When we were in episode 294, 295, we have seen that before the flood, people lived very, very, very long time. Okay, we saw this diagram when we were looking at this previously in previous episode. Again, like I said, I'm not the original author of this diagram. Now, I have added these ages myself. I took this from the Bible Blender. That is where this picture came from. Now, this is the picture we saw, and essentially what you are looking at here is how long people were living before the flood. Okay, before the flood, you can see people living so long. If you remove Enoch from this list, obviously, because God took Enoch. He didn't live out his days. So if you remove Enoch from this list, the average age of the men listed in this genealogy from Adam to Noah, their average age is 912 years. So there is no argument about this, that before the flood, people were living very, very long time. Now, the question is, if when God said, nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years, if that means that God is imposing an average lifespan of 120 years on human after the flood, can we support that with fact in the scripture? That is what we need to do. So I'm going to put another diagram on the screen and see whether this supports the fact. Again, I am not the author of this diagram. Again, the credit goes to this website called Conforming to Jesus Ministry. That is where I got this diagram from. So what we have seen here is actually a list of men that God gave us in the genealogy from Adam all the way to Abraham. Okay, so this is from before the flood to after the flood. Is that okay? All right. So here, these are the one we've already done in our previous picture. So these are the people. These are the people before the flood. Okay, those are the one here. Now here, these are the one outside the flood. And when you look at it, it is clear that after the flood, people were living well over 120 years. Even up till over 500 years after the flood, which was in the time of Abraham. Abraham was well over 500 years, or about 500 years after the flood. Abraham lived 175 years. Sarah lived 127 years. Jacob lived 148 years. Now, those ones are not on the screen. So you can see here that even after the flood, people were living longer than 120 years. Okay, so that cannot be what God was saying in Genesis chapter 6 verse 3. It was not setting an average. It was not putting a ceiling for the age of human post-flood. Yes, it is. God is coming in. This is a judgment. And remember what we said about God's judgment. God is not judging human because he's angry in the sense of, you've crossed my path and I'm going to destroy you. No. Judgment is actually saying this is the result of your sin. Okay, God is just telling people you've broke the rule. Okay, you've broken the rule, and according to the Constitution, this is your punishment. It is what happened when we break the rule of God. What have we said? We have said that the fact does not support that God was putting a ceiling or setting an average for the age of men post-flood. Having said that, though, this investigation raises another question. People definitely live significantly younger than they used to before the flood. Let me put that picture back on the screen. Okay, look at this. Okay, after the flood, people were definitely living significantly younger than they were living before the flood. And that is the fact. And the question is why? Why did people live shorter lives after the flood? Why do people live shorter life after the flood? Now, I want to show you something intriguing. So this was how old people were living before the flood. And we said if you remove Enoch, where is Enoch? That if you remove Enoch from this picture, the average here is 912. Now, this is after the flood. When you divide after the flood into two, before the Tower of Babel, we notice something, that actually the people that lived before the Tower of Babel lived longer than those people that lived after the Tower of Babel. How do we know where to stop? If you look at Genesis chapter 10 and you look at verse 25, it was talking about genealogy. Then it came to this gentleman called Eber, and that is this man here. And unto Eber were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg, and this is the guy here. And he told us this important information. that it was in the day of Peleg that the earth was divided. Now this was during the time, and we will come back to that in our story. This was during the time when God divided humans' tongue at the Tower of Babel. There was a drop in people's age significantly after the flood, but also after the Tower of Babel. So I'm going to go over that again because I want us to see this, because we are asking ourselves question why. So after the flood, the age of men suddenly dropped. So Shem was 600 years old when he died, but understand that he was born before the flood. For the children that was born after the flood and before the Tower of Babel, their average age was 445. And I think that is really, really very, very important. Now, the interesting thing is that when you now look at the average age of the men after the Tower of Babel, the age of the men also suddenly dropped further. So even after the Tower of Babel, the age of the men suddenly dropped further from the average of 445 to, wait for it, 206. So from Peleg to Abraham, a total of 6 generations, the average age there was 206. I think that is really, really very, very important. Okay, before the flood, we removed Enoch. The average age was 912. After the flood, between the flood and Tower of Babel, we removed Shem because it was between both. We removed Shem. The average age was 445. And after the Tower of Babel, from Peleg to Abraham, the average age was 206. You can see this drop in average age of human. Remember what we said. We have said that we cannot support from scripture that God was limiting the age of human to 120 from the statement we read in Genesis chapter 6 verse 3. So we are going to come and say, so what then does it mean? That will be in another episode. But we are asking ourselves that yes, even though the 120 is not talking about the ceiling or the shortening lifespan of men, but we did see that there was this sharp drop in the age of human, average age of human, as you go through these various sections. Let me put it in a diagram, because a diagram always say it a lot. What are we saying? So this was before the flood. Now we've removed Enoch. The average age of men were 912. This was up between the flood and Tower of Babel. Over there we removed Shem. The average age of human was 445. Now after the Tower of Babel up till Abraham, the average age was 206. And one intriguing thing about this is that you will see that there was a sharp drop from before the flood to the second section. It was about 50% drop. Actually, it's about 51%, but about 50% drop. And from the middle to the third section, it was also about 15% drop. Actually, it's about 53% drop. And you can see this. So the question is, why did humans' average life expectancy significantly suddenly drop after the flood, number one, and then after the Tower of Babel, almost 50% drop in both cases? And that is the question that we are asking ourselves. Okay, so let's go back. The question again is, why the general decline in life expectancy? So there was a general decline in life expectancy. But number two, what is peculiar to the flood and to the Tower of Babel that can then explain this sharp drop in life expectancy? About 50%. So there's the general decline. We know that. Okay, just like when you are drawing a graph, maybe it's gradually, ascending or gradually descending. But then you have this drop, you have this trough or this peak. In this particular case, this trough. So there's the general decline, but there is this particular peculiar sharp drop after the flood and after the Tower of Babel. And the question is, what is the reason for that? Now, we are not going to answer that question today because we are out of time. Next episode, by the grace of God, we are going to dig deeper into this, and then we can then go on and move into the question, what did God mean when God was talking about these 120 years? if you are not born again, I want to see you in heaven. God wants you in heaven. That is why Jesus came to die for you. And now all you need to do is know you are a sinner, come to Jesus, ask him to save you. You don't need to go anywhere to do it. Bow your head wherever you are. Say it your own way. I'm a sinner. Save me, Jesus. It will save you. If you mean it in your heart, it will save you. You will be a new man, a new woman. You will become a daughter, a son of God, members of his family, citizen of his kingdom. He will walk with you. You will grow in your knowledge of him as you fellowship with other like-minded believers. And when this is all over, you can then spend eternity with him in the new heaven and the new earth. Do it right now.